Hey everyone, welcome back to the Layback Podcast. Joining us today is Trevor Powers. Trevor is a co-founder of the Backside Groundballs Media Group. So we're going to take a little bit different approach today. As opposed to bringing on somebody that is super deep in the weeds when it comes to elbow injury research or something like that, as I'm sure you could tell by those last few episodes, we're going to take a step back and talk about kind of the nature of the game, especially at the college level. So with what Backside is doing, Trevor and his group really take deep dives into what is going on in player development at the collegiate level. They're helping grow the game like crazy. They have some awesome tours. They have some incredible stuff on YouTube and on Twitter, so definitely go check them out on social media. But with that, Trevor, I'm going to pass it over to you, and please pick up the pieces for anything that I screwed up in the process.
Yeah, no worries. I obviously, first off, I appreciate you having me. I apologize to your listener. No PhD on the end of my name. Just a couple of master's degrees from dragging myself around as a grad assistant at some different places. But yeah, I mean, you hit all the buttons there on Backside Groundballs Media. My elevator pitch is we like to cover college baseball from a player development perspective, right? Just highlighting programs instead of the nuts and bolts of the box score and what happens on the field. While that's beautiful and that's a lot of fun from January-ish, February-ish till obviously now in June as we're recording it with the final coming up this weekend, we like to cover college baseball 365 days a year. So we travel to cool places, we have great conversations, and we try to produce the best content from that. So anybody who's interested in player development, hopefully we're given a good perspective of what behind the scenes life is like at all levels of college baseball.
Beautiful. And we'll get the toughest question out of the way right up front. This isn't coming out until after the championship has already been played. So who are we congratulating?
I'm gonna have to go with LSU. I'm one of those guys that the talent sometimes if I'm gonna throw some money on some stuff, which that we don't need to talk about nefarious activities like gambling in college athletics, but I'm gonna err on the side of the talent. But I love what Coastal's done, and what specifically Coach Matt Williams has done on the pitching side. I don't know if you've ever been up to their ballpark or anybody who's listening to it. It is tiny. And the fact that that pitching staff has done what they have done this season with a tiny ballpark where the wind howls out to left coming off the shore, it is makes it even more impressive. And it comes as no surprise that the pitching staff's been as dominant as they've been in Omaha with the graveyard that those gaps are, where now they can pitch a little bit more freely and confidently. And those home runs at their home park, which they led the nation, or they were one of the tops in the nation in ERA. So if they were preventing home runs in Conway, South Carolina, they're obviously doing a really good job of preventing home runs in Omaha, Nebraska.
So there you have it. Bayou Bengals, national champions. If that isn't how it plays out, Trevor is the guy to direct all hate to. I'm just here creating a platform for him. So I didn't claim anything. This is all on Trevor. But yes, Trevor, thanks for the take. I know that is a little bit of what you guys offer with your Twitter spaces and different things that you guys are doing during the week. It's been fun to tune into those, especially during the postseason. But let's step away a little bit from postseason baseball because unfortunately the timeliness of this isn't going to be perfect. I would rather dive deep in the weeds right from here, getting into who is doing player development well. So who right now is setting the standard as far as you are concerned?
Yeah, I mean, for us, right, and the conversations we've had, everybody is chasing Arkansas. Chasing Arkansas from a player development perspective in terms of facilities alone is the obvious one. You go there and it's Disneyland for baseball people like you and I. You walk in there, you walk around that place, and we didn't even bite off the half of it in terms of the video that we produced for them. And it was still unbelievable to watch and picture what they have. And they are in a league of their own. But from a player development perspective, especially on the mound, obviously, if you're a pitching guy in this space, you know the name Matt Hobbs. I had a friend that played for him at Wake Forest and before moving on to professional baseball. I've long since thought Matt Hobbs was the best pitching coach in college baseball and one of the best pitching coaches in baseball in general, right? Talking about professionally as well. I know he's had opportunities to take professional pitching coaching jobs in that state at Arkansas, but it's very hard to kind of compete with what they have in terms of the minds that they have in that space. And then the most important piece is the translation of the information to the 18-year-old kid, right? I can sit there and I can read and understand data or biomech or force, ground force, and the things that are necessary to kind of develop guys and keep them healthy and make sure they perform come game time. But the ability to translate that to an 18-year-old who all have different levels of understanding and what that information means for them is the most impressive part. And then being able to pull them out of that lab, put them on the mound, and have them perform come game time, because that's a completely different beast. And I think when you watch what this pitching staff has done over the last couple of years, and again, Arkansas has always had really good pitching. That's where Wes Johnson was before making the transition into professional baseball. It's been unbelievable what they've done and the resources that they have and how they implement it into the day to day.
So rounding out the Mount Rushmore, who would be your other three? You don't have to go as in depth if you don't want to, because that might run out our podcast if you give the full review on every single one. But maybe who are those other 2 to 4 that you would say are close by, just hanging on to those coattails maybe of Arkansas?
I'll stick towards my bias. The guys at Arizona, which Kevin Vance just took the job at San Diego State, one of the best and smartest minds that we've been around. And again, kind of the same thing. And you see the success for people that don't know. Like, everybody will see on TV that Arizona's field is huge. You'll see 340 down the lines. It's 405 in basically the gaps and to deep center. And you'd think this must be a pitcher's paradise. Well, the ball travels there, and specifically in the early spring where it's cold everywhere else, it's obviously warm in Tucson, Arizona, and it's a jet stream. And Arizona has never really been known for their pitching. Well, over the last 2 seasons specifically, I think they've won on the backs of their pitching. And in talking with guys that have played against them, specifically in regional and super regional setting, they weren't that overly impressed with the stuff of the guys on the mound, but they were overly impressed with the game plans and the execution of the game plans, which to me, it says a lot about how a pitching staff, coaching staff prepares their guys. When you are up there as a hitter and they're flipping over 2-1 breaking balls when you think you're going to get a fastball, and they're getting ahead with fastballs when you think you're going to get a breaking ball, and you're in what I call 50-50, where you can't really predict what the pitching coach or the catcher is going to call. I think that's what Arizona does really well. And looking at the guys that they've had, a lot of young guys with really good stuff that are going to be really good in the future. And Coach Vance was partnered his director of pitching strategy, who's now Arizona's pitching coach, John DeRoyne. They're both awesome. Some of the smartest guys in the space. That's with the people we've been around. Obviously, Wake Forest, who you have a relationship with, Coach Muscar is one of the best in the business. His ability to translate, it's a little bit more in New England brash personality, which gravitates for some people, but his ability to make improvements and adjustments for guys, and the way his pitchers talk about him and the respect and admiration they have for him is a really big piece in mine. We don't get to interact with a ton of players, but when you have players like Rhett Lauder, Cam Minasi speaking in high regard for a pitching coach, you obviously know that they've done good things in development. And what Kristen does on the biomechanics side, like, she says she's not a baseball person. She's one of the smartest baseball people I've ever talked to. Like, just being honest with you, like, she could be a pitching coach if she wanted to. She understands baseball that well, and her ability to translate it to go outside of our biases, right? Because again, I would have to hit everybody. So I feel bad for our guys at Miami and some of the other places we've been, which all have great pitching minds, and that. I would say, obviously, the box score matters to me, right? So looking at a couple programs that specifically, obviously, I've already mentioned Coastal and what they've done. We're anticipating the ability to get there this offseason at some point. We have some ties to the program. We're hoping to get down there and talk pitching development. Obviously, what Max Weiner did last year at Texas A&M and then this year at Texas. Again, it's the ability when you see staffs make a complete multi-run ERA shift from year to year, and it's one guy that comes in and makes a change. And sure, the athletes matter, and sure, being able to develop guys and to have good stuff, it matters. But there's a correlation there between Max Weiner stepping on at 2 separate staffs and immediately improving. And again, when you see guys with B+, C grade stuff, right, in terms of the Power 5, pitching to a 2.5, you know they're game planning. You know they have 5 pitches for strikes. You know they're able to execute when they need to execute, pitch backwards, confuse hitters. And those are usually the things that stand out to me when we haven't been around these programs, when you watch them pitch and you're like, oh, he just landed a changeup in a count that you wouldn't expect anybody to be able to land a changeup. And that's how you know they're preparing and developing guys the right way.
Wonderful. And it's so hard for me to respond on all of these because you are so much more tapped in than I am. I live in this niche world solely focused on elbows most of the time. Yeah, I watch the sport, but some of me watching the sport is more as a fan and then just working with the guys that we work with. So hearing just the in-depth knowledge that you have, I feel like I am just tuning into one of your episodes or something that you guys released. I'm giddy on my side of the microphone here. But you did mention Coastal. It's so hard to even begin to consider Coastal a mid-major, given what they've done in baseball and how that school cares about baseball. But maybe who are some mid-majors that you think are hitting with the big boys when it comes to pitching development or how they're investing in what they do?
Yeah, one specifically that stood out this year was Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky was popping up. During the season, we did a ton of graphics that were top pitching staffs, ERAs in the country, and every week the Hilltoppers were there. So at that point, you start to take notice, right? And you start to kind of identify that as maybe that's somebody we want to get around and talk to. We were supposed to get out there. Life circumstances happened on our end. We weren't able to make the trip out and spend some time with them. And now Coach Napoleon's, he's up to Illinois. He just took a job with the Fighting Illini. So we won't be able to talk to him directly. We could obviously get up to Illinois and see what he's got going on and what they've been able to do. But it was really impressive to see what Western Kentucky was able to do. And you see their guys, and it's such an interesting kind of balance in the landscape today. Like, it should be something to be proud of that we're seeing Western Kentucky guys enter the portal and go to schools like Auburn and go to schools like Texas A&M and Tennessee, and these schools being interested in your best players. But it stinks that that's what the reality of the sport is. But I think it showcases just how good they've been in terms of development, that Power 5 SEC programs are interested in taking these guys at a mid-major program and penciling them into high leverage bullpen roles, even potentially starting roles next year because of the development that they had at a previous stop. The other one that stood out this year, obviously Northeastern with Mike Glavin, who the Glavin name means so much in the baseball community, but it's another program that stood out as a team that constantly popped up in the top 5 of ERA. They won a ton of baseball games. They really dominated the CAA this year, which the CAA is a great baseball conference. And because of Northeastern's complete just domination of the league, they ended up being a one-bid league because they ran away with the regular season title and they really didn't lose for an extended period of time. They ran into an absolute buzzsaw of a regional having to go to Florida State and having Mississippi State, another Power 4 program, in their regional as the 3 seed. But that's a program that has done a great job over the years of developing pitchers. And obviously you see their success this year. It comes as no surprise when Mike Glavin is your head coach. But I think it's really important to kind of identify that as a team that's really doing things right on the pitching side.
A few of these schools that you mentioned, you particularly hit on their coach, not just on their systems or the tools that they have. So I do want to spend some time on the actual labs or the development systems that these teams or universities are creating. We talked a little bit about this before we started the camera and kicked things off today, but how important do you think is having the tools versus having the horses? And then maybe the third piece of having the farmer or having the director, the coach, who's how do you use the tools? How do you use the horses? That has to come from somewhere. So I don't know if you have biases of what's most important. How do you rank these things? But I'm sure there's a heavy mix that I'd love to hear a bit more from you on.
Yeah, so my perspective, as the conversations we have, I always gravitate towards coaches, right? Before the season, we were previewing some stuff because, as you've mentioned a couple of times, we do cover the sport. We do talk about the sport that happens over the weekend. A phrase that I found myself saying a lot in the early season was people in programs, right? I trust people in programs. I don't want to look at the roster and know this guy was really good at this Mountain West school last year and this guy's a potential draft guy and play that game of like diving into the roster. I want to put my backing into people in programs, right? And the reason I always say that is because you see on the hitting side, I'm a hitting guy, even though we've talked so much about pitching today, and obviously you're a pitching guy, but you see guys go to Tennessee and just instantly get better on the offensive side of things. There's a common denominator there, no matter who that 1 through 9 is, right? Whether it's Christian Moore or Andrew Fisher or Gavin Kylan or Blake Burke, no matter who's hitting in that lineup, Josh Elander's the guy that's pulling the strings in terms of the development. So guys are able to then trust their development on that side of things because Coach Elander has been there for so long. And that's always what I've meant by people and programs. There's common denominators between successful offensive programs. And a lot of times it's at the same schools, the same places. And on the pitching side, it's the same thing. So my brain always goes to the farmer itself, right? The coach, the guy who's overseeing it. But it does become a balance because I think that it's how you implement that information. That's the thing I've learned the most being out on the road and having these conversations. A lot of places have the tech, or at least have the investment to get the tech. But that is rendered useless if you don't have somebody who can then translate that on to an instantaneously on the mound to improve whatever you are working on improving, right? Newt Force, Kinatrax, Trackman, Edgers, anything that you speak about in the player development tech space, if we just have that and we tell a recruit, yes, we have it, but we don't know how to implement that into your development strategy, you're not getting every ounce of potential out of the horses, right? Which is the third element of this is the horses that you get. Recruiting matters. I'm never going to be somebody that says recruiting and talent doesn't matter, but there's certain programs that milk every ounce of potential out of their recruits, right? They trust their development. And I'm going to keep relying on Arkansas. Carson Wiggins, who was a guy who could have made a lot of money in the draft last year and probably in 2008 doesn't even think about going to college. But Carson Wiggins decides to trust his development with Matt Hobbs, and he shows up on campus and he's really good before he ends up getting hurt, right? Which is unfortunate, but when you throw 101, there's risk involved in that. And I don't think it was overwork or anything that led to that injury. I just think it was circumstantial. Cole Gibler's another guy who pitches in high leverage situations for Arkansas, a guy who could have made some money. He doesn't have like elite overpowering velocity. He came out this year. Last night, he walks into the game against LSU, 26 and 2/3 innings with 56 strikeouts and 11 walks as a true freshman. He could have went and made a lot of money in the draft. But now that he's come to Arkansas, he's going to make more money. And not to name any programs because it is circumstantial, but there are programs out there where guys kind of make that decision of, do I go to college and potentially rise into the first round and get a lot more money, or do I go take the guaranteed money on the front end of being a professional baseball player? And those guys don't see the same success as they do at these other programs because while they are the horses and they are getting the horses, they're not giving them the necessary TLC to make sure when they step on the mound and in their development and their trajectory to be the best version of themselves 3 years down the road. And then beyond that, a lot of these programs welcome in pro guys back and because they trust these really smart minds with their development. And the pro guys even go back and want to work with guys like Matt Hobbs and Corey Muscara and these guys at the top of the sport because they know that they have their best interest in mind and there's nobody that knows them better and how they move and how they perform better than those guys that spent 3 years with them.
You mentioned a few different technologies in there. We could run a whole grocery list of different technologies. Obviously, we are one. There are different tools that can be used by schools, players, whatever, and the applications are many. What are the tools, the technologies that you are seeing as most sought after or most implemented by the orgs that you guys are checking on right now? So whether it's TrackMan, whether it's Newt Force, or various force plates or camera systems, I'd love to hear just from your touring around, what technologies are you seeing as most prevalent?
Well, first off, what you guys have done on the health and preventing elbow injuries, I think is part of the future of the sport. So give yourself a ton of credit because I know you guys are a major part of a lot of these programs and we see your, what would you call them? It's just tech devices. What do you usually
machines.
refer to? Okay, yeah. Machines. Okay. So you see those a lot. So definitely that's a part of the future and what you guys have built at FlexPro Grip is obviously a big piece of the development and making sure both sides of the coin, we're getting stronger, we're getting better, but we're also staying healthy, right? Which is the most important part. And I know that's what your passion is in making sure guys are not only getting better, but also able to actually pitch, right? Like crazy concept, like actually get out in the game and pitch and perform. The two that have stood out for obvious reasons, because the names are synonymous, is everybody's heard the Kinetrax biomechanics system. They have on field and then they have the lab systems. It's really cool to be able to see and prevent injuries down the road, of being able to see how a guy is moving and how the kinetic chain is working, and being able to see if there is a leak and maybe can we pull back workload on a guy or give him an extra day of rest, or what's going on that could have led to this. It's not 100% foolproof, but a lot of the people that we have worked with, they especially the on field, right? Because the labs are one thing, but that's a different environment. That's not high leverage. That's not high adrenaline. That's not these big moments where a guy could move a little bit differently. He could overcompensate and try to throw that thing 110 through the backstop rather than allowing his body to move. When he's in the lab, he's just a kind of chill environment, allowing himself to just be freely. The one that has Brawl Star passed a lot more recently, and it was something that stood out as we got to these programs, was Newt Force. And Newt Force is, they are going to an integrated pitching lab system. So they are dabbling in everything from ball flight, ground forces, where they got their start in, and then also biomechanics. The big thing that Newt Force prides itself on is that instant feedback pitch to pitch, right? While it's great to have all this information and technology, we don't always have time to pull a report, to pull slow motion, to do all these things. What Newt Force prides themselves on is, if I'm the pitching coach and I'm working with a specific pitcher, he throws a pitch, we can take that information, have it right in front of us, and say, hey, try this. We need you to do this to get more ground force. We need your brakes to be a little bit stronger. We need to make sure we're working down the mound as quickly and efficiently as possible. Try this cue. Okay, we realize, your brakes aren't. We get a freshman in and he's all gas, no brakes, right? He throws hard, but he's just a wild horse, right? Running out in the wilderness, right? Okay, well, we can get them on some water bags. We can make sure we train those brakes and things like that. So Newt Force, I think, has an opportunity to completely take over college baseball, because what they're trying to do is take what everybody does well, right? TrackMan does one thing well. We have the Edgertronics do another thing well. We have Kinetrax does the biomechanics, and they do that really well. What Newt Force is trying to do is take all of them into one and give the coach that instant feedback in one platform from one mound and one system, and be able to then get it to your pitchers in an efficient manner to make sure that those guys end up being able to make those adjustments, so that development time isn't, hey, I threw a 30 pitch pen. Hey, here's what the data is telling us. Now we have to wait 5 days, right, to get you back on the mound, get you back up, or there's a game between then and we don't want to confuse you and give you too much information. What they're trying to do is, hey, you got 30 pitches to get better. Let's maximize these 30 pitches by getting instant feedback each and every time you throw a ball.
I've got a couple routes I want to go down here. First, I'm going to ask a Newt Force specific question. For the teams that have Newt Force, do they have one mound? Do they have a couple of mounds? What are you seeing? Because I don't even know the price point for Newt Force or what it looks like to bring Newt Force on.
Everywhere we've been has only had one mount. So it'll be a lab space, and a lot of times they have the whole setup, the cameras, the TrackMans, and they have the Newt Force mound right now. Georgia is the first one that has the full integrated pitching lab. We have not been to Georgia. Our intentions is to get to Georgia. We got to finalize a date to get out there and see kind of what the full integrated pitching lab looks like, and how Newt Force's product looks in that setting compared to everywhere we've been. It's been a piece of the puzzle, right? It's been the mound. So they have the ground force with the TrackMan, with the biomechanics, and with all the tech that you have on top of it. Georgia has this setup that's like the whole shebang, and what Newt Force is trending towards building in their integrated pitching lab.
Okay, well, appreciate that. Yes, I just needed that. I needed to know that. I don't even care if the audience didn't care. I needed to know that because I always like knowing what is coming down the line for these labs.
Yes.
What can we expect? Now, obviously, education and communication goes a long way with how data gets presented and then used by a player, right? It's one thing to have all this tech. It's another thing to present it. And one thing that I've seen is a lot of the groups that present it the best. Yes, you have your excellent communicators, and we've given those guys their flowers. And of course, there's others than the ones that have been mentioned thus far on this podcast. Those are just ones that you obviously have interacted with, or that that I have interacted with. I'm curious if you are seeing a competitive edge in the groups that have analytics teams or data teams that can take information and make it digestible. So beyond like Wake's analytics team, are there other schools? I know Iowa has a great one that you are seeing as a true weapon where they can take this data and make it actionable.
I think when you talk about the data and the tech, it's probably the most important thing, right? We were down at Miami yesterday as we record this, and Coach Arteaga, he had mentioned that when he took the job, they had already been in the works of getting this technology. And Coach Arteaga was a pitching coach from 2003 until he got the head coaching job. He's been at Miami for 23 years. He's seen a complete wave of the tech and the information and all of the data. And he was talking about in such an admirable way to be this honest and blunt about it. He didn't even know how to turn an Edgertronic camera on for the longest time, right? He needed help to do those things. And when he took the head coaching job at Miami, he was like, this tech is useless if we don't have somebody that can interpret it and be able to get that information and digest that information. Congratulations. We have in-game biomechanics. But if we don't have a biomechanist here or somebody who understands why it's important at the very least to translate that to the guy that we're trying to develop, we are wasting our money on our subscription. We're wasting our money on the implementation of it. We might as well not even have the technology, right? And I think that's where it's the most important thing. And I think where you can see the divide as a mid-major program, you're kind of fighting an uphill battle because you don't have the resources to go hire a full-time director of analytics or a full-time biomechanist or these positions that these schools have and offer and are produced by the school for research purposes, right? West Virginia just hired a full-time biomechanist, and like it's partially just as much on the research end of things as it is on the baseball development side of things. So if you're a school that just has a pitching coach, you have to be multiple in these languages that you speak. And not everybody has the luxury or the brain power, quite frankly. Like we can only remember so much. And if you're worried about calling pitches on a Tuesday afternoon, and then you got to go read a biomechanics report, you're probably already, filled up in terms of your capacity. So it's so fascinating to me because it is the translation and the implementation and having the team, the army, as I've heard people call it, of people that are just really intelligent in this information is what matters most. It's fascinating because every school is different. Matt Hobbs intentionally, there's two things he says. They don't call it a lab intentionally. He's like, this is a baseball development center. They call it the PDC. He intentionally doesn't call it a lab because he says, we're not doing research. We're making better baseball players, right? And he's very intentional about that. And he was a big part of building Wake Forest's lab as well. And he has a great relationship with Kristen. The other thing is they don't have a biomechanist. He understands it partially because of the work he's done in the past. DJ Baxendine, they have a director of pitching on top of DJ that all work in collaboration. But his whole thing is, I want baseball people that understand why it matters to baseball itself to translate it to baseball players. And I think it's fascinating because there's multiple ways to skin the cat, right? At all of these different places, it works, right? Everywhere that you go, and these places that implement it in a really good way. But the main thing is seeing how each school maybe does things a little differently and what their priorities are. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to how you translate that information, digest it to an 18-year-old kid to make sure that he implements it when he steps on the rubber.
One of the mid-majors that I want to give a shout out to, they're near and dear to our heart because we've worked with them for a couple of years, but Lindenwood University, and just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, they, as a pitching staff, they have led their conference in ERA back-to-back seasons. They recently transitioned from D2 to D1, and they made it all the way to the conference championship game this year. So obviously they have a bright future in under pitching coach Denton McNamee. The pitching staff has done incredible things, but one of the things that he implemented this past school year was a student-driven data and analytics team to try to match what the Wake Forests are doing, what Tennessee has, what Iowa has, and what, frankly, a lot of these massive schools have. At Lindenwood, it has started off with a 5-man team, but that's a great place to start if you have people that can handle and clean your data and give players actionable reports, because then that takes the load off of how you explain the coach on a Tuesday who has to turn around, crunch all these numbers and give it to a player to actually make them improve. When you talk to people like Corey Muscara, one of the things that he always harps on is he tries to surround himself with people that are smarter than him. That way he can just focus on what he needs to focus on. And anytime a blip on the radar shows up, he can just go talk to someone. That way you can take the load off of yourself and really focus on what matters most, which is getting your players better in the offseason and then in season winning ball games.
100%. And it's so important to coaching, right? Like is having people around you that you can rely on for the things that might not be your strength. We all have our strengths in terms of things really in life, but specifically in like, I think I'm really good at this. Being able to have somebody to maybe, like you said, take that load off of your back to be able to get the juice out of what you need in terms of the information and be able to continue to develop. And I think the most important part too is that you're not one-on-one, right? And we've been to some facilities that are like just actual like standalone facilities where you get one-on-one time with a guy. The thing that's most impressive about college coaches is they're working with 19 guys, 20 guys that are all pitching. And guess what? Not a single one of them moves the same way, has the same arm, release height, arm angle, all these information pieces. Their fastballs move different. Like you don't want cookie cutter guys because if you're rolling out the same guy who throws the same speed from the same slot and the same movement patterns, you're probably not going to be very good by the game 3 of the weekend when the team you're playing has seen them. And being able to have multiple people or at least be the chameleon, as I like to say, of being adaptable enough to, hey, I know how to coach a sink guy compared to then being able, the next guy steps up on the rubber. It's like, now I need to coach a ride guy, ride to 12-6 compared to sinker slider guy, and being able to be adaptable in those moments and be able to know how to translate that message and not get consumed by one guy might need more ground force. One guy might need to be obsessed with the track, man, and being able to digest all that information and dumb it down to what that individual needs. Having student analytics and staffs like that, I think it's the most important thing for especially mid-major coaches, like you mentioned, at Coach McNamara at Lindenwood. Like he's got enough going on his plate, right? He's worried about recruiting, he's worried about the portal, all these things like that, because it does magically kickstart while your season's still going on, all those things. And you need somebody to help you. And sometimes those student managers can be the difference between being able to maximize your pitchers. And it doesn't show up in the box score as much as the pitching coach it does.
During your response, I thought of a new statistic that I would love for you guys to debut next year. You could probably do advanced statistics and start to get predictive at some point, but a player development budget versus wins statistic, and you guys could monitor,
I like that.
Yeah, who's getting the most bang for their buck.
Mm-hmm.
Based on everything we talk about, Arkansas should be really freaking good all the time. Mm-hmm. Do we, not knowing what goes into it financially or something, do they believe they're underperforming even though they go to Omaha seemingly every single year? Mm-hmm. I think that would be a fun one that you guys would probably be better suited to create than anybody in the game.
Definitely. I think that's something we'll have to do some research and maybe put some feelers out there to see if we can get budgets and how much they're paying on subscriptions. Because I know some of these schools, you're right, like there's a lot going to subscriptions a year based on some of the technology that they have.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. One, I would be really interested in that statistic, but two, I figured we could take, I guess, the lighthearted spin on just because you spend the money, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed results.
Yes. And I think that's, again, we don't have to name names, but every SEC program to a certain extent is committed. Some are more committed than others, but not everyone wins, right? And I think that's the thing and I said it earlier, the box score does tell us a lot of stories, right? I could come up here and him and haw and say all the right things, but if my 35 guys don't believe in my message and how we're developing players and it doesn't translate to the field and on-field success specifically, you might not be as good of a coach as maybe you can put off, right? And use that persona. That's one of my favorite things about going to these places is you have to remind yourself, and not that we've been anywhere bad. So if anybody who's listening to this is like, you're talking about my pro. No, we're not. We've been nowhere bad. Everywhere's great. You have to remind yourself that head coaches have to interview to get head coaching jobs, right? So they're naturally learn how to speak and kind of spin a message to whatever you want to hear. And so you can get caught up, and a lot of coaches will wrap you around their finger quicker than you can even imagine because they're always recruiting. That's their life. So when you get around, they don't even realize they're just talking about player development, their program, and things like that. And next thing you know, like, I love this guy. And then you go out and they don't succeed on the field, and you're like, how does that happen? It's like, There's 300 programs that have guys that are like that, right? That are good speakers, but it's the implementation of that side of things. You could be a bad speaker, but if you implement it and guys get better under your watch, that's the most important thing at the end of the day.
I want to switch the nature of the conversation a little bit because you talk about it so much on the player development side, obviously, because that's what you're passionate about. What you also have a great insight to is where these programs are headed. Thus, you could probably give really solid recommendations for how a potential recruit should go about asking questions or go about taking inventory on where is it worth it for them to spend their time in their recruiting process. So we'll talk about schools again in a minute, but now switching to focusing on the recruit, given everything you see in the player development world, what are a couple questions that you would say are must asks?
Yeah, probably no questions specifically that I can think of, but I think doing like educating recruits to do their own research, right? Like that's one of the things that we're most passionate about is being able to get to these programs and allow them to give their spin on how they utilize stuff. And you can kind of see right through fake, right? Is my best way to describe it. If you go to a program and let's say you've digested all of our stuff, and I'm not just doing that for clicks perspective. Again, we have Matt Hobbs for 35 minutes. We have Kevin Vance and John DeRoy for 35 minutes. We're going to have the guys from Miami for multiple minutes. We've been to Wake Forest's lab, broken down what they've done, all of these things. And if you go to a place and you've listened and you've digested, you've done your own research, you've taught yourself these things, and the messaging just doesn't seem as linear and consistent as it did at some of the programs that are at the top and these coaches when they speak on a public platform that do a really good job, I think that's when the red flags go up to a certain extent. Obviously, that kind of leads that knowledge base of what the tech is or how player development works and things like that. That's going to kind of lead you to the right questions. Like, you're going to be able to ask, okay, you have the tech, but what does that mean? Right? What does that mean for me specifically? Hey, if I'm a guy who rides my fastball and pitches at the top of the zone and is successful, I really need to start working on my breaking ball. How are you going to help me add that breaking ball to be the best version of myself, right? If I'm a high school pitcher who needs to add 20 pounds of muscle, how are you going to give me the nutrition and the strength and conditioning to make sure that by the time I step on the mound, I'm a well-oiled machine that can handle the workload of a Friday night starter in your conference? All of those questions that come from the knowledge base of doing your own research and being, understanding of yourself and what you need specifically. Don't just think you're the superstar that's going to walk in and I have good enough stuff to get college outs and things like that. Understand maybe where you need to get better and then ask the coach for an in-depth plan. That was the coolest thing about when we went out to Arizona when I first talked to John about going out. He said, we're going to do this exactly like we would do with a recruit, right? We're going to break down how we use the tech and things like that. If schools are shying away from showing you how the proverbial bacon is made, the behind the scenes of how these things are put together, there's probably a reason for that, right? And I think that's when you want to put your antenna up and go, okay, that's a little odd. Whereas school Y that I visited 2 weeks ago was like, here's our systems. Here's where we think you fit in. Here's where we think we can add to what you already have. And this is how we're going to get you better.
Part of my motivation in asking that question is what I hear from coaches all the time is kids saying, I want to go somewhere where I can develop. But what does that mean? What does development mean? One, I want to know from the kid, what does development mean to you? But also when you ask it to a coach, I want to know what a plan is. So now I definitely want to go back and watch you guys at Arizona to understand what development means there. So one of my biggest takeaways from what you said is try to get a plan. Of course, a coach doesn't always know who you are and they won't have that full picture until you actually step foot on campus. But if there is a take-home message, it's try to get a plan from a coach. What does development of you look like to them?
Yeah, I would say that that's the most important thing. And just like being open to feedback that might be a little harsh and you might not want to hear. It's like, hey, to pitch here, you're gonna have to be X. And you might not want to hear that right then, but it's better to hear that in October of your junior year when you're going through the recruiting process than it is October of your freshman year when you thought that you're the best thing that's ever touched this earth. And then you're getting rocked in the fall and they go, yeah, you got to work on X, Y, and Z. And we don't really know how we're going to do that. Or you end up concerned about your overall trajectory and path. It's just about asking the right questions and asking for that feedback and making sure you're in a position to take that feedback and implement it. And the big thing I've always said too is that continues once you're committed as well, right? Like you commit to a school. So many times high school athletes, like they think the commitment's the finish line. Like the commitment is the gun going off to start the race in my mind, right? Like the commitment is like the bare level of like your baseball career, right? Anybody who's played college baseball knows the things they remember. And you don't remember high school baseball that much. You remember your 4 years of college baseball and the experiences you had. So many times high school kids and recruits, they want to get to that finish line of that Instagram post and that dopamine hit that comes from, yeah, I'm going to X university, and you get to feel good when you have 98 comments and 2,000 likes on it. But the reality is that's just the beginning of your journey. And you should start having those conversations like, hey, for me to succeed on campus, what do I need to do when I show up August 1st of my freshman year and move in? What do I need to be and what do I need to do to succeed as much as possible?
Continuing down this path of recruiting for a bit, but don't worry, I promise it goes right back into player development now. I want to talk about re-recruiting, not getting recruited at another school, but a coach convincing their guys why they made the right decision 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where they can really develop from an 18 or 19-year-old bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid when they showed up to a certified dude with a degree as a draft prospect when they leave. So whether you want to talk about specific coaches that you are seeing develop guys well long term or programs that you can really speak to that are seeing guys through for true 3, 4, potentially even 5-year careers now at this point. Are there schools or coaches that you can call off of your head?
Yeah, so the one that stands out to me is Tom Walter at Wake Forest. We sat down, we had a conversation with him, and it was more culture wise, less player development. But obviously, those are super valuable in this space and understanding. And we asked him that. And again, maybe it's off the record that he said this, but I'm pretty sure it was on the podcast episode. It was a long time ago. We're now rounding out probably 16, 17 months since we had this conversation. But his main thing was just being honest with the prospect, right? Of being able to kind of paint your vision for what their journey's going to be. And some guys can perform right away, like at Wake Forest. Nick Kurtz came in and he was a focal point of their lineup day one, and he barely spent any time in the minor leagues, and now he's a big leaguer. That is the ideal journey that everybody thinks they're going to be on, but it's not the reality for most guys, right? And in the transfer portal era, it's so easy to get caught up in other opportunities or potential fits and feeling like you made a bad decision because you didn't play right away. But I think the coaches that do the best is they outline that development for the guy. Hey, this is what the plan looks like, right? We're going to put you in a position where you're going to gain muscle mass and improve how you move the first year so that when you step on the mound in year two, you might only get 15 to 20 innings, but you're going to be in a better position to not only succeed when you get out there, but you're also going to stay healthier. Then after year two, we're going to put you into a position where you're going to fringe midweek start, high leverage reliever, and outlining that path for that guy and being honest and not lying and saying, hey, we think you could be a guy for us. And then next thing you know, they come in, they're pitched 2 innings that year. So his ability to translate that information and talk about how important it is to just flat out be honest with guys, right? And it's on both sides. If you don't think a guy can perform, it's now being forced on coaches' hands with hard caps of 35 and rosters decreasing. But if you don't think a kid can perform, just tell them and then help them get to their next spot, whether it's kicking down a level to a mid-major school, kicking from mid-major to D2, D3, they want to go home, making some phone calls and helping that kid find his spot and treating, at the end of the day, the player like a human. And that's when the development gets translated the best, is these programs that understand that that is a human being there and making sure that you are in constant communication with them about what you see their potential to be and what they need to do to get there, and not worry about hurting feelings in having those tough conversations. Because I think that's why so many shy away from those conversations. Like, well, if I tell him he's only going to get 15 innings next year, He's not coming back, right? Another school's promising him 40 in a starter role, but explain the why, and you think that he's only going to get 15 innings. Hey, you're not physically ready to get on the mound and not blow out, right? And put yourself in harm's way. We have data, we have information, we have reasons why. We think you need to do this before you can do that. And I think the programs that do that best and can outline it, it's because they know what they're doing. And then you believe it as a prospect because they know what they're doing and they're genuine about how they go about it. And that's why you see programs be able to hold on to guys for a tick longer than you would think, even when guys don't perform or see the field right away. It's because those conversations are happening behind closed doors.
I'm always going to be pro player in everything. I always want players to chase down whatever opportunity they think is going to be best for them. You have one career, you should live it however you see fit. I encourage anyone to do that. But then on the other side, I have so much respect for the programs that are able to keep guys who on paper are super talented or do nothing their first couple years at a school. And next thing you know, they're the biggest deal when they're a junior or senior or a fifth year. And one, props to the kid for finding a program that they fit well in and they really feel good about. And then props to the coaches for not only convincing that kid that that is the spot for him, but truly investing in the career of that athlete, not just the season, not just the opportunity or the potential economic payoff of having this kid for a little bit, but truly nurturing that kid to what he can be long term. I will always celebrate that. Not to turn this into a complete recruiting talk, I do want to shift to our current stage in baseball, not just the transfer portal, but funds are about to go crazy with
Mm-hmm.
the expanded scholarship limits. Now, the fact that every guy can be on scholarship at a school, not every school is going to do that, of course. It requires significant financial backing to get there, but there's going to be more money in the sport, especially at the highest level. And then on top of that, there's NIL deals. So now, how this applies to player development, are you seeing the arms race change a little bit? Are the financial allocations going to change now from a player attraction perspective? Does it truly shift to we're just going to pay more guys? Or is it still we're going to have the brightest and shiniest things to get guys to come in?
Yeah, I think it has to be the latter of being able to that pay matters, right? And maybe it shouldn't, but in terms of allocation of funds, if I mean you have a business, I have a business, if we have an opportunity to spend money in a different way and guarantee that this person's going to sign on the dotted line, it's a smart business decision at that point compared to adding a lab or adding a piece of technology or improving the locker rooms or any of these things. And again, we rely on these facilities to be nice enough for us to come hang out and walk around. But the reality is professional baseball doesn't put money into their facilities all the time, right? They have nice facilities, but it's not like the flashiness that a college facility is. Why? Because guess what? They can entice free agents with dollar bills. It's like and at the end of the day, it's important to be able to have that and be a part of it. So I think 100% the landscape is changing as these schools can find a way to pay players and make it and it now that it's legal and be in a position where they can entice a kid not necessarily based on track record of development or how many guys you've put in the show or the conference championships or the amenities that you have as a student, but instead, hey, we can get you, the numbers that get thrown around when we go hang out at these schools. There's schools that are like, these kids are going to be hard in life when they have to accept a job for 80 grand a year. Right. And that's at the power four level. So think about what football players are getting, but that's a different conversation for a completely other day. So there's a lot of money at the top of this sport, right? And kids then have to make a decision of I can have 80 grand a year for 4 years while I'm in college, and 2% of baseball players that play in Division One baseball make it to the big league. So that's far from a guarantee to get the signing bonus that I think I could get and set myself up for life. Or should I trust this program with my development and with the ability to make sure I'm in a position to succeed? The new landscape with the House settlement, It's going to change a lot. Rosters decreasing, hard cap, red shirts counting towards that cap, even with the scholarships and everything that goes into it. It is going to make the sport more cutthroat than it already is. And it's going to put people in a position to make really tough decisions. Like, people see the scholarships and they think, good, yes, finally, baseball fully funded. I would actually say lean on the side that I think that it's bad for the player, quite frankly, with the hard caps and what the situations will be.
And the take that I have coming from this is player development is actually going to end up mattering significantly more. Because if we have hard capped rosters, especially in the pitching side, we can talk about hitting a little bit separately. Generally, the most talented guys are going to be just fine, and you can play every day. You don't need a lot of lineup shifting on the offensive side of the ball. But it doesn't matter that if the roster gets cut on the pitching side, still, you can't throw more innings than you already are expected to throw. It's not like we can take a Cade Anderson and say, like, hey man, we also need you to throw on Tuesdays now. That just doesn't work. If the roster shrinks, you can't have your starters do more. You can't have your high leverage guys really do more. You need the bottom end guys to step up at that point. And that means just acquiring talent isn't good enough. It's what you can actually do with that talent that's going to pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I could go so many different ways because obviously we've had these conversations. There's so many important pieces. A couple things are really important, right? Remember, this is not, and for our listeners that are like, why would you decrease roster sizes? Makes no sense. This wasn't a baseball decision. The House settlement was an NCAA athletics wide decision, right? And what is negatively and has always negatively affected baseball is the fact that football has 105. There is no female sport that evens it out that also has 105, right? It has to be a 1-for-1. So what gets the shaft? Baseball. So as you see rosters decreasing, whereas the MLB is increasing rest time for pitchers, increasing time between workload and decreasing the workload when guys get on the mound and being cautious about pitch counts and how that affects guys. The NCAA just said, we're going backwards, right? We're going to decrease roster sizes and we're going to make guys throw more, and you're going to have to throw your relievers on Tuesday and then have to roll them back. And it's concerning, obviously, in your space, it's concerning for the health of athletes. You can't miss on your bottom three guys. And I think it's going to change roster construction because if I am a college coach watching the LSU Arkansas game, they wrote out Jacob Myers, who was a transfer from Nicholls State, who was all conference at Nicholls State. And this mutant had 14 innings pitched on the year. And he was throwing 98 with a banger slider. If they can grow them at Nicholls State, why am I going to take the 18-year-old kid that's never proven he can get an out at the college level? It's how much risk are you willing to take for that talent itself? And I think it's going to increase a premium, A, as I mentioned, on experience, but also B, strike throwing ability. Like, I think the ability to come in when you're up 10, down 10 on a Tuesday and not have to burn three more guys than you have to burn because you have the high ceiling freshman. He comes out, he's a baby giraffe. He moves all over the place. Some days he's in the strike zone, some days he's not, but he's 96 with a banger slider. He could be great. That's what we have now. And if he goes out there, he lays an egg. Well, we got 42 guys on the roster to be able, okay, go to the next guy. Okay, go to the next guy. Well, what happens if you have three of those guys that are built like that and do that? Well, then who are you going to stop the bleeding when the team starts chipping away? Your guy, right? One of your guys that's going to pitch in the weekend. So I think there's going to become an increased need for strike throwing ability just to be able to say, hey, we're down 10, go out there and wear it for 70 pitches. Like, you just have to have a guy that's ready to do that on a Tuesday. And he could be 84 from the right side with a bad fastball. And it's like, we don't care because it's like, we could lose this game 40-0 at this point because we're already down 10. And then the other thing I think is going to be the two-way player is going to come back to a certain extent, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Jack Caglianones of the world. It could be, hey, this shortstop that we have, who's a freshman who we really like, and is our 10th hitter, right? Our 10th position player. He also was a pretty good pitcher in high school. Let's get him reps. Let's make sure he takes care of his arm. Because if we're in that scenario I just outlined where we're up 10, down 10, we can go to him and he's never going to be our Saturday guy, or we're never going to pitch in our rotation. He's never going to pitch high leverage. Maybe if we're lucky and he develops, he might. but at the very least, we're using a spot on the roster that's valuable. Just every piece of that 35 is going to matter because of how much baseball you play in those short extended period of time. And there's no 20, whatever it is, 26 active, 40 inactive injuries. Because if a guy blows out, I'm sorry, I don't have to use such a bad injury. If a guy rolls his ankle doing strength and conditioning in the morning and he's out for 3 weeks, he still counts for that 35. There is no injured reserve in college baseball. That's a hard cap. If it has happened after December 1st, that guy still counts. And what happens if you have a bad year where 7 guys have nagging injuries? Like, you're now working with a 28-man roster in a sport that's like guys are up and down. Like, this is not professional baseball where it's steady Eddie and a guy just goes out there and at least you know what he's going to give you. They're 18 to 22-year-old kids, and it's going to completely shift roster construction to me. And back to the recruiting question, I worry that it's going to be the death of high school recruiting, because if my job is to build the best 56-win team and show this kid might be talented, I'm taking the kid that I know has gotten outs at the college level, that has passed his classes, because that's the thing we don't talk about in player development. It's like, can this kid adjust to college? Does he fall in love with beer? Does he fall in love with the dining hall? All of us know at least one person that was a really good high school baseball player that got to campus and they were a completely different guy because college affected them. We don't even guarantee that freshman can make it through a semester. That kid that's transferring from a Division III school, he's got a degree in hand in some cases, or he's got 2 years of academic success in his back pocket. We need that guy to be useful on our 35, and that's going to increase the value in those guys.
Since you gave the two-way take, the name to look out for that I'm going to drop for next baseball season is incoming freshman at Florida State, Charlie Buckles. First baseman, outfielder, left-handed pitcher. Big fan of what that kid's going to do. I mean, fingers crossed. I would love to see him get drafted. I don't know where he ranks on that whole thing, but he to me, I'm not going to say he's Jack Caglione, like that is different. But when you start to think about the prototype that is needed in college baseball to be most successful in this next stage with smaller rosters, guys who can do multiple things, that's a guy that I would like to keep an eye on. So that's going to be my early drop for a freshman to watch for next season.
I love that. I'll jot him down so that when we do our ACC previews, he's going to be a guy I'll check in through the fall and make sure I have on my radar before the season starts next year.
I have to show I know something about the game besides just what's going on at the elbow.
Hey, we all have our things that we're really good at, and you just happen to be really, really good at that elbow thing. So it's a super important piece of, you're a big reason why we get to enjoy what we're seeing in Omaha in the College World Series, because these guys like Chase Shores, who throw 101 with banger sliders, are actually pitching. And it's awesome to see. Like, we want to see those guys pitching. We don't want to see them rehabbing and doing too much work behind the scenes.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the love. And of course, I appreciate your time tremendously. This has been an awesome conversation. I want to put on like my PTI gear and start debating things and going back and forth. But hey, I guess I pigeonholed myself with trying to have a super educational podcast rather than just talking heads arguing back and forth. And I crave the day that I can do that. Maybe one of these days I can add something else to the platform where I just talk shop for an hour each day. But thanks a ton, Trevor. This has been tremendous.
Of course, it was awesome. Time flies when you have these conversations, and it's always nice to shine a light maybe on the conversations that we've had. If I dropped our conversation with Matt Hobbs in the first 15 minutes and you made it to this point and didn't just exit out of this podcast and then go listen to that, highly recommend that, because I listen to our stuff because I do all of our editing and our post-production. So I listen to our stuff a lot, and more times than not, I kind of drown out the interview by the time it's produced and published, and I don't really come back to it. That's one that no matter how many times I listen to it, it's like, God, that's good. Like, I'm like, that's a nugget. He's good. And you can see why I was so successful. But yeah, I can't thank you enough for having me on. And obviously I would love to make it more common and obviously do these conversations, especially as we get out and see some more facilities and have some more conversations and get a lay of the land a little bit better each and every time we get out and meet new people.
Of course, man. I'm so excited to see the tour that you guys are about to go on here, get a look into more facilities. I don't know. Are you allowed to name drop some of the ones that you guys have coming down the line, or is that all under the chest?
We'll name drop it. I'll worry about the back end side of things if people are concerned about that. But confirmed Richmond and Charlotte in August, basically confirmed at least interest. Georgia, West Virginia, UNC, Coastal, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we have some connections at the program. That's one. They just happen to still be playing baseball on June 19th, which is awesome for them. And it's going to make our value in our conversation so much better. But it's a local program that we want to get to. We're supposed to circle back to Penn State this year and what Coach Gambino's building up there. They just had a facility upgrade since the last time we were up there. So we're going to head up there and be able to do a deep dive on them. And then, I mean, there's a ton. We could keep going. We're super excited. I know UNLV, who you work directly with, they're interested, but they need to get their facilities finalized in the fall. So looks like Vegas in sometime in the fall is going to be a trip, which the wife might not be as happy, but I'm sure Dan and I will have some fun and heading out west for that. So and again, the schools we've been to, we look at like we're going to be able to get back to some of those spots, including Arkansas, Arizona, and some of the schools that I mentioned that we've been to before.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to all those. I'm going to be glued to YouTube here pretty soon. And I guess 30-minute tour after 30-minute tour, I'm going to feel like a college kid all over again. I'm stoked for it.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of fun to do those deep dives, and trust me, when you're there, it's even better. So we'll have to get you out to one of these schools, especially the ones that you work with, and be able to get you a behind the scenes look and have some of those conversations.
Oh, that would be a ton of fun. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I guess anything I can do to hitch my wagon to the Backside Groundballs group, I'm going to do my best to do that. But Trevor, once again, this has been quite a Thursday. To all the listeners out there, thanks for laying back with us.